This is a Tawny Grisette, which is edible but must be cooked before eating because it is toxic when raw. It's quite a common mushroom, being found in woodlands in the UK from around about June to October, in mixed woodlands, moors, heathland, that kind of thing. It is, however, a member of the Amanita genus, which is notorious for containing some of the most toxic and deadliest mushrooms in the UK. Things like the death cap and destroying angel. And so this, the Tawny Grisette, is not, in my opinion, one for beginners to be eating until you have more knowledge and experience. I'm not exaggerating when I say it was about 5 years of foraging before I plucked up the courage and, of course, had the knowledge and experience to eat this mushroom. With all that being said, it is a relatively easy mushroom to identify, really. But just remember that some of the characteristics of this mushroom are also seen on the deadly toxic species in this genus, such as the white crowded gills and the bulbous base. So the Tawny Grisette, it has a tawny or orange-brown coloured cap with characteristic striations on the edge of the cap. The cap starts out like a dome shape and it flattens out as it develops, and it normally retains a slightly darker section in the middle of the cap. The gills, as I mentioned, are white and crowded, and they are free of the stem, meaning that they stop just before they actually get to the stem. The stem itself is white, but it can sometimes develop a very light hint of the cap colour when it gets older, and it's usually hollow, especially towards the base, and the base itself has a white vulva or sheath, and it appears bulbous like all Amanitas. The stem also tapers, and so it gets thinner as it gets closer to the cap. There's no ring or skirt on the stem, so it should be fairly smooth, and the flesh of the mushroom should be white. There are some other similar grisettes, but they're all edible as long as they are cooked. There aren't any truly toxic lookalikes, but as I said, there are some deadly species with some similar characteristics. And so because the stakes are so high in getting this one wrong, you should still wait until you have lots of knowledge and real world experience of seeing things like death caps, destroying angels, the gemmed Amanita and the Tawny Grisette itself, actually seeing them in person in the woodlands to be 100% of your identification. Remember, if you are at the stage of being able to be 100% confident in your identification of this mushroom, it must still be cooked quite thoroughly to destroy the toxins in this mushroom. If and when you do eat it, the flavour is nice, quite mild but good, and you can eat the whole mushroom, but the stem can be a bit fibrous sometimes, so personally I only eat the caps. This is a mushroom called the blusher. I only know because I've already examined one and I have seen that when you cut the flesh it bruises red. But this is not a novice forager's mushroom because it is part of the Amanita genus, which contains some of the most deadly species in the UK. And this particular mushroom as well, the blusher, on the top at least, and even underneath, looks very similar to a mushroom called the panther cap, which is also lethally toxic, containing very high levels of muscarine. This is quite a good example of the blusher. You can see the cap is brown underneath the scales, a dark brown, and then it does fade as well towards the edge of the cap, which is something the panther cap doesn't tend to do. But the main difference, the key difference with the blusher and also something called the grey spotted Amanita is that on the top of the skirt there, if you can see, there are those striations. Can you see those stripes running down the top of the skirt there? Those striations, importantly, they are not seen on the panther cap, the toxic mushroom. The panther cap, I repeat, it does not have those striations. It has a smooth white skirt, which also tends to stick out more than that as well. As I said though, still don't eat it until you've got more experience and more knowledge. Just be careful out there, because the last thing I want is anyone to get into any trouble picking a mushroom. Once you know what you're doing, it's pretty safe. But even though I've just told you how to identify it, you should still only eat that mushroom, the blusher, I think, when you've got a bit more experience. But the two key factors on the blusher are those striations on the top of the skirt and the fact that it blushes red when it's damaged, bruised or cut.